Hey everyone, welcome to part 107 of my Pokemon game series in Unity. So in this video, we'll refactor the code for forgetting moves to make space for new ones using generic selector and state stack architecture. So right now, if you try to use a TM on a Pokemon that already has 4 moves, then nothing will happen. So this is because we did comment the code for achieving that in the previous video while refactoring the code to use items. So now let's also refactor the code for forgetting moves using generic selector and state stack architecture. So right now, choosing a move to forget is handled as a substate inside the inventory. Okay, so just like the party selection, selecting the move to forget is also handled as a substate. But with our new state stack architecture, we don't have to use this. We can just make the move to forget selection a different state, and we can push that when we are trying to use an item. Okay, so we have to create a new state for the move to forget selection. So let's go ahead and do that. So here I'll create a new script called move to forget state. Okay, so this class is going to be a state of game controller. All right, and let me import the namespace for the state machine. So from the state, we have to handle the move selection, right? So we already have a UI for handling it. So we need to get a reference to the move selection UI from here. All right. But the problem is the move selection UI does not use the generic selector right now. So making it use generic selector would make it really convenient to use it from our state machine. So let's go ahead and refactor the move selection UI to use the generic selector. This is going to be really easy because this is a simple selector with a list of moves. So I'll go ahead and make the move selection UI class implement the selection UI. Okay, and it's going to be a selection UI of text slot because we want to select the move text. Okay, so now we can get rid of all the code for handling the selection because all this will be handled by our selection UI. All right, we also don't need these two variables, and all we have to do is call the set items function and pass the list of text slots that we want to select. Okay, so we already have a list of move text here. So from that list, we can get the text slot by calling the get component function for each one. Okay, so this will give us a list of text slots. So that's all we have to do. And now the move selection UI will use generic selector. Okay, so now back in our move to forget state, we can do the rest of the implementation. So first, I'll make this a singleton so that we can access it from other states. Okay, and then I'll override the enter state, and from the enter state I'll also cache the game controller. Okay, and then from the enter function we can go ahead and enable the move selection UI. So I'll call move selection UI dot game object dot set active true. Okay, And then we also have to listen to the events. So we can subscribe to the on selected event first. So I'll create a function for that called on move selected. Okay, and while I'm here, let me also create the on back function. So from the on back, we just have to pop the current state. Okay, so let me attach these functions to our events. All right, so that's all we have to do from the enter function. So next, let me override the execute function, and from the execute function, we just have to call the MoveSelectionUI dot handle update. Okay, and finally, I'll override the exit function, and from the exit function, I'll do the opposite of what we did in the enter function. Okay, so I'll disable the MoveSelectionUI and I'll unsubscribe from the events. So next, we should handle the case when a move is selected from the MoveSelectionUI. Okay, actually, before we do that, there is something else we need to do. So from the enter function, after we enable the MoveSelectionUI, we also need to set the list of moves that should be displayed in the MoveSelectionUI. Right. So if you look at the MoveSelectionUI class, here we have a function called setMoveData for doing that. So we can call this function to specify the moves that should be listed in the MoveSelectionUI. Okay. So from here, I'll call MoveSelectionUI dot set move data function. Okay, and this function takes a list of current moves and the new move that we are trying to learn. So we don't have access to those moves from the MoveToForget state. So what we can do is we can create two properties for that. So first I'll create a property for the current moves. So this will be a list of move base and I'll call this current moves. Okay, and then I'll also create a property for the new move. Okay, so using these properties, we can input the current moves and the new move that we need here. All right, so I'll just mark this as inputs because these two are the inputs that our state require. Okay, and then we can pass it into our set move data function. So first I'll pass the current moves and then I'll pass a new move. Okay, so this will set the move data for us. So next we need to handle the case where a move is selected. So when a MoveToForget is selected, we have to forget that move and learn the new move, right? But the code for this will be handled from the handle tmItems function of the useItem state. So from the MoveToForget state, we'll just handle the selection and the rest will be handled from here. Okay. So in the onMoveSelected function of the MoveToForget state, we don't have to write any logic, but we want to expose the selection so that the useItem state will know which move was selected. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll create a public property to expose selection. Okay, and I'll just mark this as output because this is the output of the state. And from here, when a move is selected, I'll assign it to our selection property. and I'll just go ahead and pop the state. Okay. And by the way, we can just reset the selection to 0 when we enter the MoveToForget state. All right. And also, when we go back by pressing the X button, the value of selection should not be set, because in that case, the user didn't actually make a selection, but he just pressed back, right? So here what we can do is we can set the value of the selection to some invalid value to indicate that no selection was made. Okay, so here I'll set its value to something like -1, so that we'll know the selection was invalid. All right, so this is all we have to do in the MoveToForget state. So next we can go ahead and push the state if the Pokemon already has 4 moves. Okay, so from here we can just show a dialog like choose the move that you want to forget, and then we can push the MoveToForget state. Earlier we were calling the choose MoveToForget function, but we don't want to use that anymore. But we can still look at how that function was implemented. So this was a function. So here we were showing a dialog like this. So let me just copy that dialog and paste it here. Okay. And after that, we want to push the MoveToForget state. So this is going to be different from what we did from the old function, right? Here we were using enum for the state, but from here we can just push our MoveToForget state into the state machine. So I'll call state machine dot push and wait function, because once we push the MoveToForget state, we want to wait until a move is selected, right? So we want to wait until the MoveToForget state is over, and once it's over, we will get the selected move from it, and we can perform the rest of the logic. Okay, so from here I'll call push and wait, and I'll push the MoveToForget state. All right, and I'll use yield return since we want to wait for this to complete. Okay, and by the way, before we push the MoveToForget state, we have to set its inputs, right? So let's go ahead and set the current moves and the new move. So first let me set the new move. The new move will be dmitem.move. All right, and next we can set the current moves list. So we can get the current moves from Pokemon.moves. But this is actually a list of move class, and here we want a list of move base class. Okay, so let's convert that using the select function. So for each move, I'll get the move base. All right, so we are setting the input, and then we're pushing the MoveToForget state. So next, once the MoveToForget state is over, we can get the selected move. So we can get it from the selection property that we created earlier. All right, so let me just store this in a variable called MoveIndex for convenience. All right, and if the MoveIndex is less than 4, it means the user selected a move to forget from the current moves, right? So we have already written the code for this previously. So here in the inventory UI class, if you look at the on MoveToForget selected function, here we have written the code for forgetting a move and learning a new one based on the selected move. So we can actually copy this instead of typing it again. Okay, I'll paste it over here. So we have an error here because we don't have a variable called MoveToLearn. So this is in the dmitem.move variable, right? So let's actually replace MoveToLearn with dmitem.move. Okay. So here, if the move index is equal to max number of moves, which is 4 in our case, then we will not learn the new move, and otherwise we will forget the selected move and we'll learn the new move. Okay. By the way, we also have to add another condition here. So if you look at our MoveToForget state, here, if the user presses the back button from the selection, then we are setting the selection to -1 to indicate that the selection is invalid, right? So from here, we should also check if the selection is invalid. All right. So I'll check if move index is equal to -1. So that means the user pressed the back button and a move was not selected. So in that case, we don't want to learn the new move. All right. So this is all we have to do. So now we can go ahead and get rid of these two lines. All right. So now the MoveToForget selection will be handled from our MoveToForget state. Okay. So in the inventory UI, we can remove all our previous code and keep the code short and clean. So first let me remove the on MoveToForget selected function. Okay. And then we can also remove the open and close party screen functions. All right. And I'll also remove the choose MoveToForget function. Okay. And next, we can also remove the item selected function, since this will be handled from the use item state. Okay. So let me go ahead and remove that. All right. And finally, we can remove any unused variables that we have. So I'll remove these two. Here we don't need the inventory state and MoveToLearn variables. And we also don't need the on item used action. Okay. We can remove the selected category variable because we are still handling the category selection manually. Okay. So we have to keep that. And by the way, we can remove the inventory UI state enum also, because now we have converted all our inventory states to use state machine states instead of enum states. All right. So now our inventory code is a lot shorter and cleaner, and all the other logics like MoveToForget selection, party selection, using item, and all that have been moved to separate states. Okay. So let's go ahead and test MoveToForget selection. So let me go to Unity. And by the way, we have an error here because we are also using the MoveSelection UI from the battle system. So I'll just comment this for now, and we'll handle this when we refactor the battle system. Okay. So now the error should be gone. So next, we have to set up the MoveSelection UI by adding text slots to each move text object. Okay, so since this is not a prefab, we'll have to delete all the move text except the first one, and then we'll have to add the text slot, assign the text, and then duplicate the move text to create the new ones. Okay, so now all the move text objects will have the text slot. And by the way, since we deleted the old objects, we'll have to assign them again to the MoveSelectionUI. So let me just make its size 0, and then I'll just drag and drop all the move text once again. Okay, so next we have to assign the MoveToForget state to our game controller. So let me go ahead and do that. Okay, and here we also have to assign the MoveSelectionUI. All right, so that is all we have to do. So let's go ahead and try testing this. Okay, so I'll open the bag and I'll try teaching cut to my Charmander. But since the Charmander already has 4 moves, we'll be prompted to select a move to forget. Okay, so let's say we want to forget growl and learn cut. So yeah, you can see that it is working properly. All right, so we have refactored our move to forget selection state to use generic selector and the state stack architecture. And now our inventory UI is a lot more cleaner. We don't have to handle all those states from here. Everything is handled from separate states. So I'll stop the video here, and in the next video we'll start refactoring the battle system. So before you leave, make sure to leave a like on the video and consider subscribing to my channel. That will really help me out. And you can also support the series on Patreon if you can afford it. So thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.